Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm a huge fan of Professor Simpson and her work, and I'm so excited to be invited to her virtual class and to meet you guys. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Sujung Kim, and I teach East Asian religions at DePauw University in Indiana. I came to the US in 2007 for my PhD program. Before that, I was born and raised in South Korea, not North. I naturally, growing up in a Buddhist family in Korea, I naturally became familiar with Korean religion. But during my PhD program, I came to be more interested in medieval Japanese Buddhism. So I ended up writing a dissertation on medieval connections between Japanese and Korean medieval Buddhism. So now I teach and research specialized in both Korean and Japanese Buddhism. And today I will be talking about a heartfelt love story between a Korean monk and Chinese maiden, but all of these stories were retold by a Japanese monk in the later medieval period. So let's jump in, and I'm going to soon share my screen with you. So just give me a second. How do I do that? So everyone, now you are looking at my screen, and I disappear here. So the talk is titled The Lovelorn Lady and the Stony Monk, Woman, Sexuality and Emotion in the Kegon Engi Emaki. How many of you have heard this Japanese word manga? In Japanese, manga means cartooning, comics, and animation. It is not only a multi-million-dollar business. Manga is a worldwide cultural phenomenon that has forced a new international visual language. Although manga is a modern invention, some Japanese experts even think that Emaki's scroll from the medieval period may have been origin of the modern Japanese comic and animation culture. Whether this claim can be verified or not, what I would like you to remember here is that Japan has an exceptionally strong visual culture. I know that Professor Simpson already explained to you what emaki is, so my explanation about emaki will be brief. Emaki were produced as early as in the Nara period, but it was really in the late Heian period, roughly 11th century, that they began to be produced and to circulate in greater numbers. Emaki are scrolls containing both texts and illustrations, and they were used to tell the stories of eminent monks, of famous temples, and historical events. Also, similar to manga, emaki contains both text and illustrations. What this means is that this particular format allows synthetic viewing. In other words, the process of synthesizing the multiple parts of a narrative image ensemble to form a coherent interpretation of the whole work. There are around 100 extant emaki, and today I'll be focusing on the uisang or gisho. Gisho is Japanese word for uisang. Gisho section from the 13th century emaki, Kegon Engi Emaki. After this, I will call it simply the Kegon scroll. The scroll illustrates two biographies of two eminent monks, 7th century Silla figures. The first one is Uisang and the second one is Wonhyo, but what we're going to focus on is Uisang or Gisho part. By the way, Shilla is an ancient Korean kingdom that existed until the 10th century in Korean peninsula. If you are curious about how the Gisho scroll would look like, here is the entirety of the scroll. What is Intriguing about the visual part of the Kegon scroll is first that although the title states that it is a biography of the monk, the narrative focuses on Uisang's love story with a Chinese maiden called Shan Miao, whose narrative presents a plethora of intense emotions such as affection, despair, shame, and piety. Second, the Kegon scroll is one of the earliest known works in which the painted scenes contain short captions. In Japanese, it is called e-kotoba, that are used for etoki performance, a type of Buddhist storytelling in which pictures are used by a monk or nun to tell an edifying tale. In this talk, I would like to examine 2 points that previous scholarship on the Kegon scroll has not examined yet. First is reading the Kegon scroll through the lens of gender. Second is more about the scroll itself, particularly focusing on the interplay between etoki performance and emotion. I hope that you already have read our sign reading, so I will not repeat the plot of the Kegon scroll. But if I quickly remind you, this Korean monk, Uisang, goes to China and meets beautiful Shan Miao or Zhenmiao at a house of Chinese laymen who offers lodging for the monk. In the description of their first encounter, this text states, I quote, Zhenmiao raises her seductive eyebrows and flatters him, unquote. This is a typical Buddhist rhetoric of the female as temptress, both a cause of sexual transgression and a signifier of worldly attachment. However, dedicated to his study and success, Uisang sternly rejects her and immediately went to Chang'an, the capital of that time, to run away from her. In the following scenes of the Kegon scroll, the narrative and pictorial focus is Zhenmiao's love, her devotion, and eventually her suicide. But don't worry, the story appears to have a happy ending, because Zhenmiao magically turns herself into a gigantic dragon, and she also escorts the monk's ship all the way to Shilla. Once Lovelorn maiden, now in her animal form, she becomes a powerful protector of the eminent monk. With her selfless love, she continues to help this Stony monk even after the monk's arrival in Shilla. When the master tries to establish the first Kegon, or in Korean Hwam, temple, known as Busoksa Temple in Shilla, he encounters several adversaries. But this time, Zhenmiao turns into a boulder and expels them, which allowed Uisang to build a temple and spread his new teachings. All in all, the story seems to deliver the Buddhist message of a transformation of mundane love to religious devotion, the loftiness of eminent monk, and his successful transmission of great teaching. But what if we read the story from the perspective of Zhenmiao? In Buddhism, women and sexuality are denied in principle. When women are mentioned in the Buddhist literature, often these women are earthly manifestation of bodhisattva. I probably think you guys already know this term, but bodhisattva means a being who is the embodiment of compassion. So often these women are earthly manifestations of bodhisattva who provide spiritual guidance and salvation for the male protagonist. These stories of manifestations of bodhisattva were favored in numerous Buddhist miracle stories, origin tales in Japan, for they grant legitimacy to monks' redemption and awakening. In this convenient androcentral rhetoric, women's role is often downplayed and dismissed. Even if Zhenmiao is powerful and capable enough to transform her body from that of a human to a dragon, and later a boulder at will, her body is still condemned and she is a mere protector. One of the explanatory notes inserted in the Kegon scroll makes clear that Zemyo's miracle was possible not by her ability or her faith, but by the virtue of the Korean monk. So I quote, "Had Zemyo fallen for someone other than Uisang, such a miracle would not have been manifested, no matter how deep her love and respect. This was due to the teacher's virtue. Zemyo encountered knowledge in a previous life and heard the true Dharma. Dharma means Buddha's teachings. Yet, still, she remained tainted with the dust of the world and could not escape the retribution of being born a woman." Unquote. Already back in early Indian Buddhism, there exists the theory of 5 obstacles, which became the doctrinal basis for gender soteriology in the later Buddhist traditions. According to this view, the female cannot attain Buddhahood simply because of her female body, and since the negative karmic retribution resulted in the inferior body, every female's goal has to be to experience rebirth as a male, the only legitimate and perfect body to attain enlightenment, which is the goal of Buddhism. It was in the medieval period that this idea, together with other notions such as the inherent pollution of female body, came to be fully institutionalized and internalized as a religious reality. I know there are a lot to unpack when it comes to misogyny in Buddhism, but let me wrap up our gender part here. I would like to discuss more when we meet on this Wednesday, so please bring any questions that you have, but also please allow me to move on to another interesting topic that I prepared for you guys. So etoki is my next point to talk about. Etoki, or picture explaining, constitutes a central component in the narrative scrolls that make the story to be performed and come alive. Etoki refers to 3 distinctive and yet related concepts. First, the painted image. Second, the performer or picture explainers. And third, the performance, picture explaining or pictorial decipherment itself. What is noteworthy here is that medieval Japanese Buddhists did not really differentiate the act of deciphering texts from the act of explaining of painted images or of the performance itself. Other than artistic value, etoki also has several religious, social, economic, and religious functions. It was highly didactic and often was used as a proselytizing tool for religious propaganda. One of its central roles was fundraising. If etoki's benefits were so much great, what strategies were used to maximize its impact to its audience? While closely examining etoki from the Gyujo scroll, I locate emotions as a crucial strategy in the Emaki tradition. By analyzing how emotions were narrated, visualized, and transformed in Emaki, I identify emotion as a crucial component in the etoki performance and suggest that the ways in which emotions are communicated play a more central role in transforming participants' experiences than the narrative itself. The Kegon scroll belongs to Kozanji Temple in northwest Kyoto, Japan. Kozanji was revived at the beginning of the Kamakura period as a training center for Kegon sect by the influential monk whose name was Myoe. Myoe is possibly the author or the editor of the textual part of the Kegon scroll. It was suggested that Myoe saw his sponsorship of the production of the scroll as a way to promote Kegon teachings. But what exactly did Mue intended to tell about himself through the story of Uisang? There are many strong parallelisms between the life of Mue and that of Uisang, if you recall the piece that I assigned. For instance, one example, Uisang's accomplishment of studying in China and Mue's long unfulfilled wish to go to India. He wanted to go to India twice, and each time he failed. Second evidence is Usang's story with Jemmyo and Mue's close relationship with his female followers in his life. Considering this almost mirrored image between the two eminent monks, for Mue, Jemmyo in the Kegon Scroll may have been a time capsule, and it is not just a story from a distant past took place in China and Korea, but a story that needs to be revived in Japan. Fabio Rambelli, the eminent scholar of Japanese religion, has pointed out that there are different uses of medieval Buddhist texts. This is a very relevant point for our discussion here. The Kegon Scroll consists of different layers of text and image, and it is intended to be not just read, but to be felt. The Gisho Scroll does not present one single story. On top of the main narrative, it adds colorful illustrations that match the story and explanation texts in Japanese kotobagaki. And also explanations within the image in Japanese, ekotoba, explanations within the images. For further clarification, both kotobagaki and ekotoba are textual portion of the emaki, but the main difference between the two is that kotoba is often lengthier and provides an explanation of illustration that follows, whereas ekotoba can be a simple captions that directly engage with illustration. Interwoven all together, the entire structure of the emaki is designed to be seen, heard, interacted with, and felt. In medieval Japan, emaki was often used in picture explanation, in which the hand scrolls were displayed to a group of people as a raconteur. In Japanese, etoshi hoshi explain the hidden Buddhist meanings of the tale, pointing to related illustrations. As a kind of multimedia literature, etoki was a tool for mass communication in pre-modern Japan. From the 10th century on, etoki has been continuously performed, and currently about 24 temples offer etoki on a regular basis. If we look at the earliest uses of etoki, it was a form of preaching with some visual aids. During the medieval period, however, etoki's performative aspect came to be highlighted with more theatrical elements. As a form of performing arts, etoki appealed to a wide range of social groups. There are two etoki performances. The first was a temple etoki performed by the clergy of major Buddhist temples. Second is an itinerant etoki performed in public spaces such as markets, places, roads, bridges, and pilgrimage sites. These wandering performers included both males and females, priests, and lay people. The wide appeal of etoki lies in its ability to engage with people's emotions directly. Furthermore, what makes etoki more performance than simply preaching lies in its strategic orchestration of human emotions when it was performed for a live audience. As narrative progresses, along with the storyteller or narrative performer, the viewer engages with the act of multisensory reading. While bigger mandalas or paintings may offer some grandiose viewing, A closer and more intimate viewing of the hand scroll evokes an intense and dramatic progression of narratives. In particular, the material form of the hand scroll allows the experience of the performer to be conveyed to the viewer in a unique way. By rolling and unrolling, the performer interprets the text and images as they appear and synchronizes his or her emotional responses with the characters or situations. In other words, this specific bodily engagement with the hand scroll allows the performers to engage deeply with the characters and makes the emotions more poignant to the viewers. In this way, the Atoki explainer's job was not simply recounting characters' feelings artificially. Rather, the performance as a whole works to stimulate imagination and to mediate an effective experience for the viewer. But what is it that allows the intimate emotional transaction between the performer and the audience in the case of the Kegon scroll? How does the Atoki performer effectively convey and communicate emotions here? This is what I'm going to talk about below. Throughout the Gisho scroll, the comments within the images, we already talked about it in Japanese ekotoba. It appears at first glance to be prompts for the storyteller. When we examine them in greater details, however, we find that there are different kinds of comments and that they serve different roles. Some comments are recounting the depicted events, while others are capturing conversations among the characters. These carefully placed comments in the emaki functions as a critical mnemonic device for the storyteller to perform feelings and allow the viewer to laugh and cry together with the characters. Here are some examples of these comments. The first ekotoba example is from this Kisho scroll number 3. She looks through the mist and thinks, is it Daishi's boat? By the way, Daishi means referring to Lisang, and it means the great master. The second example being, here Zenmyo drops her box and rip and wail. And the last one, oh no, how dreadful. What are you doing? Sorry. These prompts give a sense of urgency and reality, creating a bond between the Atoki performer, the spectators, and the characters. As the narrative develops, these prompts closely follow emotional charges in Zenmyo, and these comments thus gradually help participants to feel what Zenmyo feels in each situation. This channeling of emotions, however, requires both expressing and concealing emotions with the paralanguage of the performance. In the case of emaki, the unrolling and re-rolling of the scroll in particular adds more dramatization and more sentiments. When it rolls out with the proper timing, it generates more suspense and surprise. You probably remember when you think about how exciting it is when you say peekaboo. And in the case of Gisho scroll, it is precisely these comments that help the storyteller enact emotions and the audience gets pulled into the story. What all of this suggests is that the performance of narrative scrolls means not just evoking emotions, but reenacting and embodying emotions. In conclusion, I would like to evaluate a couple of points that I talked about today. First, when it comes to the gender issue in Buddhism, I hope you to remember that it is unfair to simply label Buddhism as a sexist religion. Instead, I would like to invite you to think about the complex historical and socio-political contexts in pre-modern East Asia and what religion played in that context. Secondly, I would like to think about the deeper nature of storytelling. Know that not all emaki is produced for performance, but if they did, it was one of the most widely used medium for performance. In this talk, I highlighted that emotion plays a central role in transforming sensory experiences into intense emotions, allowing all participants to be expressed, experienced, and reenacted. I think more research on emotion in Buddhism can provide more insights to explain how emotions shape the way in which people interact with other human beings, gods, artifacts, or sacred sites. I believe that neglecting emotion is to leave out something vital. One of the reasons why emotions in religion have not received enough attention so far is due to their less prestigious position compared to reason. Although in recent years there have been a growing interest in the role of emotion within religion, and a number of studies that combine research on religion and emotion has been appeared. I think an investigation of emotion, which long has been a conspicuous blind spot, may provide a fresh understanding of how narratives act upon us and move us to react. So that is all. Thank you everyone for your attention, and I will see you on Wednesday. See you. Bye.